We've been addressing questions in the Q&A box, and I can, you can take a look see there, and I can also, and I'll move the questions so I can see you all versus having them in a different screen. They have been answered for the most part, but I can highlight some that have come in. So one question is providing an example of the MSTP IDP and allowable appendage. And the answer, it can't be provided if it is blank. That means no data entered and presented as data collection or questionnaire form. And a question that we always get, and as a reminder, they said, will these slides be available? And they will. We'll post them in two ways. One is that with the feedback loop that was already posted, we have a draft of the slides. They're not the ones that we use today, but an example of the slides already there. And we will update the slide deck that's already linked to the feedback loop, but also we will post this on our websites near the MSTP page, along with the recording of today's webinar. So yes, all of this information is going to be available to you and others who were unable to join us today. And then a question was about, we submitted in an RPPR in November of 2023. Should we include a separate progress report in our May 2024 competitive renewal? A progress report is part of the submission of your application. So this means a separate one is not required because the interim will kind of hold the spot for a little bit for your application. Other things happen, for example, in the case that the MST application doesn't do well in review, but we don't think about those things yet. We'll worry on the positive, submit a progress report within the application, and we tackle those other details after that if needed. Another question that came in, and I think it was already covered, and Latarsha did a wonderful job. She was answering this question live, which was amazing. Questions about the other attachments. What information is allowed or not allowed. And I think she addressed that well with their two optional attachments, and that is related to the advisory committee. And she gave beautiful guidance of how you can approach this. And to our training activities, that has a 10-page limit, and we highlighted in the webinar slides some of the examples that you can include there. And some other folks, if you want to chime in if I missed anything else. There was a question about the child care cost. Is that for currently supported trainees? And it is. We understand and are sensitive to the complexities related to that, but it is for individuals currently on the training grant. It's not perfect. It's not enough. Child care costs a lot of money. We're sensitive to that. And we convey these information to the people who are thinking about this deeper and more thoroughly than we are. So we get it. We understand. We're hearing you. We're listening to you. And we will continue to convey your message to others. Somebody asked about which grants are eligible for renewals. And it's listed in the notice, the NOFO. And there are two previous NOFOs that are eligible for renewals, and that's PAR-19-036 and PAR-21-189. And that is also on our website on the NOFO and those things. Okay, other question. Did I miss anything from other folks that are helping out with the webinar that we should answer? And then we can move on to any new questions.
I think you covered.
Nope, I think you answered.
Okay, now to some of the other questions. Okay, I should have clarified what information of the training activities attachments should we avoid? I think we offered some suggestions of what can be included. I say if there's any specific questions that you're interested, why don't you reach out to one of us, and if you can tell us which ones are you thinking about, there might be something specific versus the examples that we provided both on the slide deck and on the NOFO. I don't know if anybody else has any ideas of what folks should avoid.
No, I agree that that list of what to avoid could be extensive. So
Yeah,
if there's
so
something specific you want to learn about, then yeah, reach out to one of us.
the instructions for facilities is quite unique for this. Do we include the traditional information vis-a-vis the core facilities and resources in addition to facilities information requested in the NOFO? I would say, I think you should think about the facilities information that is requested in the NOFO. And then if there are any other additional facilities that you think enhance the research training environment for the trainees. I mean, I wouldn't say put in the whole laundry list that if it's not necessarily relevant for in terms of the training culture and the training opportunities of research infrastructure that you have that related to the trainees and the goals of the MSTP program at your institution. Anything else anyone wants to add about that?
Yeah, I could jump in for a
Yeah.
minute. I think one of the things that we're trying to do is to eliminate redundancies of where information goes. And so, as was pointed out, we have for facilities and other resources, we've added some special language that is sort of training specific rather than just for tell us about all your research facilities. It's sort of what sorts of things are important for the training environment. As Mercedes just said, if there's you can mention anything else in the program plan as well that kind of wasn't captured in that area. But that section of the funding announcement really is supposed to sort of talk about, you know, the facilities and other resources. So I hope it says the instructions are quite unique for this.
And I think
In
what we
addition
have,
to, yeah, we don't want any duplication of information. If you're worried you're putting it in the wrong spot, just say, we've already mentioned this here. The last thing we want is for you to have to say things twice. So that's the goal of the NOFO.
yeah, or a major laundry list that doesn't seem in a way relevant necessarily.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah, we don't want to just see boilerplate of what you have at your organization. It's what is relevant to the MSTP program.
And why did NIGMS decide not to allow an A1 submission for unaccessible? I think we want the reviewers to focus really on what is important here. And it's the training environment, what you're proposing to do at that institution, and versus thinking about where you're fully responsive to the review, right? We really want to think about the reviewer should focus on what your MSTP program, what is the goal, what are the resources, and focus on all the wonderful strengths that your program has and what you're proposing to do and the differences that you're all making already, and really focus on what is super important here versus how responsive necessarily were you to the summary statement. I think that's the general framework for that.
Right, and I think that was great. And just to add to this goes all the way to John Lorsch. He feels pretty strongly that you should not be necessarily hyper-focused on what was in the previous review panel. For one thing, it may be a whole new set of reviewers who have slightly different focus and are not as, you know, so that the worry is it's unlike a scientific manuscript where you address the reviewer's criticisms and then you're able to get it published. It's different in an application review where you have potentially a new panel with different emphasis on the review criteria. So, and it also sort of frees you up to not have to respond point by point. Now, having said that, of course, you take all of the wonderful advice and suggestions of the reviewers and to try to incorporate that into your application. But it's just it's a sort of mindset that John Lorsch wants to make sure everybody thinks of review as slightly differently from just, well, they addressed all the criticism, so they're good to go. You still might have addressed all the criticisms and it's not a fundable application. So that's what his thinking is. Now, the reason why, if it's a pre-existing program, the problem is, as you know, it's a different set of tables. We also lose student data. So there were some considerations. That's why there's a difference between pre-existing programs versus new applications.
There are state changes to DEIA. What efforts can we indicate to show that programs are inclusive and holistic? Any thoughts? Just that we have a website that we have been updating and our NIGMS, and I'll have to look for it so that you have it here. Some of the approaches, suggestions, ways for you to think about this. Remember, in terms of any of the decisions that have come up, there isn't a limit in your efforts to recruit. So you can speak about all the wonderful things you're doing in terms of enhancing your recruitment to ensure there's broad participation and in terms of inclusion and activities that might be going on. But in terms, it's for the recruitment aspect of it. And again, I'll look for the link and post it so
I
that you
added the
can
link.
Oh, perfect. See, you're so wonderful, Natasha. You're such a great team member. Yay. So that we have been thinking about this and coming up with resources for all of you to think about it. And the list is not exhaustive. We know there's wonderful things that you're already doing, but this is just to get us started thinking about these things.
Yeah, and I think as with all things, we obviously you need to work with your offices of general
Yes.
counsel and and your existing state laws. We understand that many of you have challenges there, but I just want to echo what Mercedes is saying and also strongly emphasize that we have not changed our commitment. We are still fully committed to wanting to promote a diverse biomedical research workforce, and the ways in which you can accomplish this, as Mercedes mentioned, we're still able to do targeted recruitment. Latarsha was mentioning being responsive to the baseline data on the trainee pool. So you can see if something happens between the pool you recruited and those who were admitted, maybe it's time to rethink some admissions processes, not using race, ethnicity, or gender, as you have to follow applicable laws, but maybe there are other approaches you can take to admissions that will make sure that the applicant pool is reflected in those you admit into your program. Likewise, if they choose not to come to your organization across demographic groups, you can think about that and think about what you're doing in terms of recruitment there. So there's lots of places you can still act, you can still collect data, you can still be responsive to data, and that's all within existing laws. And for sure, check in with your offices of general counsel, but just know that NIGMS has not backed away from its strong commitment in this area.
Another question we have is multi-institutional programs should leadership from both institutions sign the institutional letter? Yes. That's a simple yes. Any other questions? I don't know if we missed
Did you
anything.
answer the progress report one about the page limit?
Please count whether, whether the renewal application progress report must fit within the 25-page limit of the research plan.
So the progress report, I can't remember how it's added in the application, but it is separate from the program plan. And there's 5 pages of actual progress report that's allowed. And then you have a 1-page limit for each trainee that was in your program. So for each trainee, you have 1 page of information you can provide on them. But it's not included in the program plan.
Okay, so the focus on supporting trainees with disabilities is wonderful, but this information is not available for applicants. Difficult to speak to the aspect of our applicant. On that webpage that also Latarsha posted, we do have some general reflections on how to think about our trainees with disabilities. So there is some information there. Again, the list isn't exhaustive. And we're also thinking about that, and hopefully we'll provide additional resources. Always, as Allison said, it's important that you work with in all of these topics, general counsel, and make sure everything's applicable law, and you check with folks, but we have some broad topics or broad suggestions and resources on that webpage that LaTorsha put in terms of thinking about trainees and supporting trainees with disabilities. But also there might be things, as is noted on the NOFA, that you already might be doing in terms of including all students with all kinds of abilities, you know, kind of that universal access. There might be things that you're already doing at your institution, but some of our resources are posted on the website as well.
I mean, I think what I would add to that is as Mercedes mentioned, active recruitment is absolutely allowable. So you can recruit individuals with disabilities. It's understood that certain organizations don't allow you to ask for that, or even, you know, put it as an optional question on the application. Some places they can, you know, put it as an optional. Of course, you know, again, with your existing Office of General Counsel, whether or not that can be used in a decision is really up to your applicant organization. But sometimes the students who then are admitted to the program, at that point, you can ask for an optional disclosure. And at that point, sometimes students are more likely to disclose because they would like accommodations and other resources. And so they're a little more agreeable about providing that information once they're admitted to the program. As you know, when they sign into X-Train, for those of you who have funded programs, they go through a system and they're allowed to potentially identify as individuals with disabilities. And that may then turn up on your trainee diversity report, even without your having to have asked for that information. So there are ways to track it. And sometimes, depending on when you ask the individuals, you might get more consented data that you can use.
There is a question about the upcoming TWD meeting. We don't have per se a TWD meeting. We're not sponsoring one. Nothing coming from us. There's meetings that could be held and sponsored by or put together by all of you, our wonderful community here. So, but we don't have anything coming from directly TWD meeting. We're not hosting one. There are movements among all of you that are program directors to put a meeting together, but it's nothing that we are hosting, nor is it called a TWD meeting. So that's out there for all of you too that are working on something. And I would just say, in terms of what this meeting is called and who's putting it together, stay tuned. But it's not sponsored by us, so I don't have really any information to share. I don't see any additional questions unless I missed something. And it's very possible. If there isn't, as always, I want to thank all of you for joining us today, for all the great work that you do. It is a partnership between all of you and the folks that are involved with the MSTP program and us. I want to thank the team that put this webinar together. There's a lot of hands and work that happens to make it all possible. Brett and LaTorsha for joining us today. Miles is here, and Andrea is here, and Allison. So I thank you again. The slides and the recording of this will be made available once we make it compliant and everything else that we have to do. If you have any questions, please write to us. Now you know who we are and what we look like, and we're here for you. And we look forward to receiving your applications. And thank you so much for joining us today. And you get a whole 15 minutes back. I can't thank you enough. And we'll see each other soon. Thank you.